Thanks for tuning in to the Black Sunday podcast. I'm your host, Ian Wilson, a writer and musician and all-round horror fanatic from Fife, Scotland. Joining me on the podcast is Kevin Grossett, a filmmaker and self-proclaimed cinema fanboy living in Edinburgh. So without further ado, dim the lights, pop the lid off your favourite tub of ice cream, and hold on to your loved ones. The dissection is about to commence.
Welcome everybody to the Black Sunday podcast, episode 1, where we'll be discussing James Whale's Frankenstein, released in 1931 through Universal Pictures, one of the Universal classics. So, I guess for me as well, man, the way I was actually going to start this was more before we get actually into the discussing the movie itself, talking more about like Frankenstein, the monster, and the kind of image of that as well, because obviously, like, for me as well, like when it actually comes to thinking about Frankenstein, the first thing that comes into my head is like Boris Karloff as the monster, like on the poster and stuff. And that was, you know, I don't think a lot of people really grasped how much effort had gone into this creation of him being the monster. And like it was actually Boris Karloff and Jack Pierce that deserve all the credit for doing that, considering it's like a century or almost a century later, and it's still, you know, nobody can match the work that they really put into that character. So when you think of the monster there, then it's this image, you know, with Karloff that immediately springs to mind, even though, you know, in the past I'd heard like a lot of people talking about Robert De Niro when he was obviously playing it in '94, and his method acting for his portrayal of the monster and like having his teeth removed and stuff like that. But like a lot of people don't seem to realise that in creating the look of the monster, that Karloff actually did exactly the same thing first, that he had like actually asked to have his molars removed just so that he could draw his cheeks in, which just totally blows my mind to like go to that extreme. And I don't know if like method acting was particularly a thing back in the 30s, or, you know, Karloff's just like, I just pull my teeth out, you know, that'll work.
Yeah, I mean, I know he's a highly influential actor. Even I saw the making of The Shining, and Jack Nicholson talks about, there's a part where he's going through his script, and he does this way of like underlining his lines so that when he looks at the page, you can quickly see where his lines fit, you know?
Yeah.
And he got that from Boris Karloff. Yeah, it's very interesting what you're saying about the image of the monster, because it's funny to think that that's all the image that we're so accustomed to of that monster is probably not really what Mary Shelley had in mind when she was writing the book. I mean, we don't know exactly, but the whole idea of this towering beast with the bolts in his neck and everything, which, you know, you've seen it done to death. It's in Scooby-Doo, it's in all these kind of things. And yeah, it's just an interesting idea that they've added something more to the legend, you know, about 100 years later.
Yeah, totally, man. I think as well that like in the book and stuff, I'm trying to remember, I think he's actually like described, I think he's a pretty tall guy, because it's meant to be creating like a sort of new breed of man, and I'm pretty sure he's got like long hair and stuff like that, like total slick back effort. So it's totally different with that, the bolts in the neck, and I guess the electricity and all that kind of stuff as well, that they've kind of added in that's sort of become sort of more, yeah, like what people would go to for it and stuff. And yeah, I was kind of reading stuff as well about like Karloff and Pierce when they were actually working on the look, because obviously they were doing stuff and it's all black and white back in the day and stuff like that. So they were like testing stuff out, like spending weeks or whatever it was together, like trying things, and like they ended up doing like loads of like shading with like green and blue paint on Karloff, just because apparently that's like what works best for that sort of film, like obviously with like the monochrome and stuff like that.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I know this is another Kubrick name drop for some reason, but he's coming up. But for example, when they shot Lolita, I know they used a lot of yellow filters because it affects the contrast in a certain way. And then for some of Orson Welles' films, I'm not sure if it was Citizen Kane or some of the later ones, they use a red filter because that just changes the contrast of the sky, basically.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, it's a funny thing that people don't really consider, that when you're working in black and white, you have to think about how each color is going to be represented in that, like what shade of grey that's actually going to come across as.
Yeah, totally, man. Fair play, like. There's this whole thing as well that like really totally interests me when I started thinking about it too. Like the fact that with Karloff wasn't even originally cast to play the monster, so it's kind of like that. I'm not saying it was obviously him just and by himself that kind of created that look, but he certainly had quite a hand in it with, like I say, with Jack Pierce. So, could have potentially gone an entirely different way, because I think originally they actually had Bela Lugosi drafted in to play the part of the monster, being that he'd already worked with Universal on Dracula and stuff like that. So they'd even like done test shots with Lugosi on the set of like Dracula when they were filming it in the castle, I think. And I don't know if you've actually seen any test shots like with like Lugosi as the monster.
No. I'm guessing by your laugh that it's not really up to snuff.
Nah, man. It's just like, I don't know, the best way I could describe it is like, if you think of like what Bela Lugosi looks like, it's like he's got He-Man hair or something like that, like a total bob.
Oh yeah, actually, maybe I did read something about this in my research, because it was kind of like the Gollum, the German expressionist film.
Yeah. I did that.
That kind of Robin Hood cut was obviously very sinister back in the day. Nightmares. Still is in a way.
Yeah, thank God they went in a different direction with that. Like, man, getting at least Karloff had the sense, like, so he's coming. It's just like, nah, not having any of that.
That haircut was like Quaid and Kingpin.
Yeah. But I was kind of, because obviously, like, Lugosi being a massive name as well that would have been attached to the film, I kind of was like wondering why exactly he didn't end up actually playing the part, because you would have thought that would be like a huge draw for like the studio and stuff as well, for actually getting the movie out and about.
Yeah.
But I've kind of looked into like a couple of things as well, and some of the stuff's kind of like made out that is like it was to do with his ego, because there wasn't any dialogue for him in the film and stuff like that, and there's like probably has elements of truth in there, just because I try to think of it as well. I know it'd be different with like stage plays and all that kind of stuff, and how they were maybe doing things differently and stuff as well. But I guess if you're thinking about doing an adaptation of the book, and if someone like Lugosi reads the book, then it's like the monster's got all the best dialogue, and then you get the script and there's like absolutely nothing in there at all apart from like just
that like, probably was the key reason. I'm just realizing as we're talking, it was actually Bela Lugosi that Jack Nicholson mentioned, so that's my first strike in terms of factual error.
Lugosi for what, underlining the dialogue?
Yeah, I think so. I need to watch it again. For some reason I had in my mind it was Karloff, but now you say it, I think it actually probably was Bela Lugosi. Anyway.
That's all right, man. This is episode 1, so we're going to make lots of mistakes. It's fine. We'll get better. We'll get people shouting at us maybe if anyone bothers to listen. But I was thinking about this stuff where, in the book you've got this monster with all this amazing dialogue that's effectively going around being the tormentor of his creator, this like well-articulated guy, or monster, I guess, that keeps popping up with like all these banging lines like "misery made me a fiend" and "beware, for I am fearless and therefore powerful," and all this kind of stuff. So potentially Lugosi's like, thinking he'll be able to work with this stuff, and then getting that.
He could wait to underline those lines, and then he opens up a page of description and the meat of the dialogue going to Henry Frankenstein, who we'll get to in a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, his character's just this mute with like no humanity at all. Through all his pages.
Straight away.
Yeah, man. So, I guess though that like comparatively as well to the book, that it does make sense to have the monster portrayed that way, where he doesn't have like language effectively or whatever. But yeah, I guess we'll get to all that stuff too. Like, Even though, like, for Lugosi, he did actually end up playing the part of the monster, eventually. But in 1931, they're obviously left needing a replacement. And I guess that also seemed to come about in quite a weird way as well, because I read this thing with Karloff where he was like saying he was already working on another picture, and then the story goes that he was just in like the canteen area at Hollywood or whatever, just in my head I'm picturing him like, like the way it is in like Blazing Saddles where everyone's in like their total gear dressed up going to the canteen and stuff like that, and James Whale like notices him tucking into a wee chocolate pudding or something like that and calls him over for a chat. And I think that's pretty much just, how he ultimately became involved with the picture, just James Whale giving him a wee shout. I don't know if he was actually...
Yeah, I know, but the image I now have in my mind.
Same image I had.
Him silhouetted against the window, it's like, that's my monster.
Yeah, this guy lurching about at the canteen. But I think that's kind of what he just obviously noticed him, and then that was thinking, he was obviously like, I need a monster. This guy's going to be the guy. I don't have Lugosi anymore.
Yeah, I mean, for all we know, he could have just been working in the canteen. Maybe he was just food.
I think he was actually working like on another film or something like that, but for sure he wasn't like a particularly well-known, household name that he became like after that movie. But talking about like James Whale too, even though I feel like we could probably do a whole episode just talking about him, because have you like heard much about this guy's life at all?
So I did a little bit of research. I found out that he was potentially the first openly gay male film director in Hollywood.
Yeah.
And he had the nickname the Queen of Hollywood.
Oh, I didn't know that, but
yeah.
Makes the time.
So yeah, I guess at that time, prejudice and all the rest of it, he was probably seen as quite a brave thing to just...
Aye, trailblazing.
Yeah, essentially, just own it.
Yeah, man. Aye.
Because then I read, people had speculated that maybe he was so drawn to this idea of an outsider, the story, the monster, this thing that's kind of unspoken of,
Yeah, totally.
It's unfit for being seen in the public, as he maybe felt at that time, or felt that other people would think about him.
Yeah, totally. That makes sense as well. I know that he did come into the film like way later on as well. Like originally he wasn't actually hired to direct it. It was like a week before he actually got announced as the director. There was a guy that was called like Robert Fleury who was like slotted in to do it. This French guy that had, I think he like worked as a film journalist and learned about film, working as an assistant to, I can't say this guy's name, man. It's like Louis Fulade. Silent serialist, and then he moved to America and got like Hollywood's attention, making these short avant-garde films. Then he signed with Paramount Pictures and worked with a guy called Joseph Stanley on a Marx Brothers feature, the Coconuts or whatever it's.
Oh yeah, films, I think.
Yeah. So he's on this, and then because of all this stuff he was doing, that they basically got him to do the Frankenstein gig just because of his familiarity with German expressionism, and I suppose his style was pretty weird and fitting for the story as well. And then I kind of was like, I read that like this, he pretty much demanded that he be allowed to write his own treatment because the studio had already paid like $20,000 for the rights to an existing stage adaptation, but Fleury like ended up writing this much different tale. And then he's the one that shot like a 20-minute test footage on the set of Dracula, and he had promised Bela Lugosi that he was going to get the part of Dr. Frankenstein. But then the studio sort of intervened and said that if Lugosi's involved, then he has to play the monster. And I do think then it was sort of partly like, I guess what they were saying with Lugosi being a bit, nonplussed about the fact he's got like no dialogue and all this kind of stuff playing this monster, and it kind of been thrust upon him when he was supposed to be playing the other sort of lead. And then I think, that the appearance of him as the monster just was so ridiculous that it kind of just totally doomed this guy's chances of directing at all. So then they basically get him like away. dangle him a carrot or something like that, he's going to go off and direct Murders in the Rue Morgue, which was pretty awesome film in itself for like at the time. I watched that a few weeks ago as well. So he's in that with Lugosi, and then James Whale comes along. But yeah, like we were talking about, this guy, like Crazy Life, saying that he's like most famous, I suppose, for being this openly gay guy, which is quite the feat back in the time as well. But the thing that I reckon I've got like the most admiration for this guy is the fact that he's just this like perfect example of like grafting away to do what you need to do to actually get where you want to be, just to work hard and make things happen for yourself. He's like this English guy, gets himself a job working as a cobbler so that he can earn money, like in Dudley, I think, or Birmingham, certainly around that area.
Okay.
Then he ends up basically selling nails for scrap so that he can pay for evening classes at Dudley School of Arts and Crafts so that he can actually pursue what he really wants to do with his life. So, wow. That's pretty commitment to the cause.
I mean, saying you want to be a director at that time was probably like saying you want to go to the moon.
Yeah, totally, man. Just like working away with those shoes, like keeping the scrap. And I think he could do he was quite a well-rounded guy as well. So I think he was like really good at drawing and acting as well as directing and stuff like that. But then he ended up as like a prisoner of war during World War I, and then survived like putting on stage plays as a prisoner of war for all these people and creating stage props and stuff. So the guy's got a pretty incredible life. Thing as well is like
work ethic, it sounds like.
Because I actually looked over his IMDb and stuff as well, and he was just like, I know things were different back in the day, but he's like, guys like directing like 3 movies every year, basically, and it's stuff like, obviously Frankenstein and that, and I think The Invisible Man he did as well. And there's all these like quite well received like popular like cult films and stuff too. So it's not like he was just making like crap all the time and stuff. But then ultimately had a bit of a tragic end when he ended up committing suicide as a result of he suffered from strokes.
Okay.
So he apparently banged his head off the side of a swimming pool and drowned himself or something, which is a pretty intense way to go as well.
Yeah,
but
unusual.
I definitely want to look way more into his life too. And there was when I was looking up stuff about him as well, there was an exhibition that was called Horror in Hollywood that was about him, and I think it'd be really cool to check out something like that if they ever do something like that again as well. But like when it comes to, I guess you'll have more insight into this with your background and stuff, with like a cinematography and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, I'm saying this as someone who doesn't really understand all that sort of thing. That's more your domain. But I think that historically speaking as well, at the time there was obviously this battle between James Whale and Todd Browning and Dracula Frankenstein battle and stuff that were groundbreaking for cinema. But in terms of artistry, I think Whale certainly seems to have the edge.
Yeah, I mean, he just makes some quite interesting choices. I'm looking at I've got a bunch of the stills up from the film at the moment, so there's a lot of things that are now, I guess you would say, sort of horror cliches. There's a lot of kind of slightly tilted angles or low camera angles to make people, including the monster, but also Dr. Frankenstein, more imposing.
Yeah.
The lighting is definitely influenced by German expressionism, like the films of Fritz Lang. It looks like it's the same kind of mood and atmosphere, and just even the sets look sort of similar to the sort of things you might find in Metropolis, especially the lab where the famous "It's Alive" scene happens, which is in a bit as well. There's some just interesting choices that James Whale makes. So I was thinking, like, the first one is the fact that to kind of give the whole thing a sense of occasion, he gets one of the actors, Edward Van Sloan, who played. I've forgotten.
He's that Waldman, yeah.
So he gets him to essentially deliver a monologue to the audience, essentially saying, "You're about to see some serious shit."
Yeah.
It's just to warn people that this film is not for the faint-hearted, and it's just a nice little touch because I think the actor's very charismatic, and it's just him coming out on a stage in front of a velvet curtain, dressed evening wear, and it just gives this extra edge to things. Maybe sort of heightens the pitch slightly for the audience going into it. One of the other things is I think Karloff's work, along with James Whale, obviously, and Jack Pierce, it pays off in the fact of how they choose to reveal the monster, because it takes, I don't have the actual timestamp of when it happens, but it takes quite a while for the monster to actually be introduced properly.
Yeah, totally, man. I picked up on that as well. And just actually, before just talking about that, if I just go back there, you're talking about like with Edward Van Sloan when he was coming out and like talking to the audience and stuff, basically, as you say, that they're going to see some crazy shit there. It seemed at the time when I was, when I was watching it, it was like seemed like completely ridiculous. But then I guess like I was thinking about it, I was like, well, I guess like obviously now that we've had the edges dulled, by the extremities of modern horror. But for like, and I guess as well that this, like that whole thing was straight up parodied, and by The Simpsons, like the Treehouse of Horrors, of like course. when Marge comes out and like basically says the warning, and then I kind of, when I was thinking about that too, I was like, well, I remember like when I was like a wee kid that when that, like when Marge came out and did that, I did kind of, I don't know if I was scared as such, but it definitely made me like a little nervous and excited about like, oh man, what's this going to be like and stuff like that too. So that's probably like my first taste of horror.
Yeah, it's like an orchestra tuning up or something, It just gives this little moment before it kicks off, a little sort of calm before the storm, but somehow just, puts you on edge.
Yeah,
man. You're hit with the imagery.
I think that like with Universal doing that too, that it was kind of like a stroke of genius for them in like terms of their marketing and stuff as well, because they're obviously, as you say, like they're creating the tension, unsettling the audience that aren't used to seeing this kind of thing, and obviously during a time as well when like loads and loads and loads of people would actually go to the cinema, and they wouldn't have obviously any internet and have folk talking shit like saying, don't waste your time, it's shite and all that kind of stuff. So, if any passerbys are like seeing people leave the cinema before it's like even started because it's scary, then it's going to have a lot of people that are then going to want to go and see the film to see like, oh man, this must be like intense and stuff like that,
Yeah, exactly. Word of mouth.
Yeah, and there's like this whole thing, like I suppose like this notoriety with cinema and horrors where there's people that have got like saying, oh man, like people were like committing suicide after The Exorcist. They went to see, what I mean? And like, if you haven't seen any of those films, then, and you hear all these crazy things about this going on, it unsettles you. You don't know what you're going to be witnessing and stuff like that. But, if it's done well, then it's, then it pays off, which, I do think that Frankenstein did that,
Yeah, I want to see it more,
Yeah, totally, man.
And I guess having that little introduction by Edward Van Sloan, it's such an unusual thing that maybe it just ratchets up the tension even more, because people are taken by how unusual that actually is for that to happen.
Yeah, man. I was trying to look up here too, because I did actually try and have some notes, just like you were saying about how it takes a while for the monster to actually get introduced into the film and stuff. Because I did pick up on that at the time too, and I'm sure it was like, like halfway, maybe more than halfway into the film before he comes in.
I mean, in terms of sort of I don't know, let's say play by play. Obviously you've got Dr. Frankenstein and his assistant Fritz in the cemetery digging up the body, or digging the hole and then removing the coffin, And it's sort of interesting the way they prop the coffin up, so it goes from, horizontal to vertical. It's sort of like a little visual indication that, this guy will walk again.
Yeah. I thought that bit was totally weird. Like,
sorry,
man. I was just going to say that bit totally jumped out at me too, and I don't know if it was just the weird way, but it was like with Colin Clive's actually essentially doing that. I was like, I didn't know at first if he was actually like addressing the audience, just the way that it was like he was looking sort of, I don't know if he was looking right down the camera, but it kind of seemed like he almost was like doing that. But I totally picked up on that as well, being a bit like, again, maybe just thrown because of the, like we're talking about at the start, actually get the audience getting addressed just before it actually gets underway there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they could have asked him to keep his eye line very close to the lens, just so there's that kind of almost breaking the fourth wall, intentionally, but kind of riding the line, let's say.
Yeah, man.
I was just going to say before, there was a part, because I was saying play by play, but I actually missed one of the first plays, is that when the cast list comes up at the beginning of the film, for the monster, it just has a question mark rather than Karloff's name. So
yeah, man.
It's very interesting, the kind of choices that James Whale has made, or potentially the studio, they might have kind of imposed some of these, just in terms of the steps you take to introduce the monster.
Yeah, man. And then, as you say, like, when he actually does get introduced, and obviously they have built up that suspense and stuff, and the actual reveal, it's kind of like jump shots, isn't it? Like, it's not a crash zoom, but it's like, it's effective of that. It's just like,
it's kind of a answer to that. It's an axial cut. So that's when you would, let's say, cut from like a wide shot to a medium shot to a close up.
Okay.
And, in the hands of a lesser director, it might have had a kind of like dun 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 over the top. Yeah. He actually chooses to play that part with no music. The other thing that's really interesting about that scene is, so you've had the question mark, you've had the propping up of the coffin, you've had the theft of the brain, which we've been told is abnormal. You've had the it's alive scene that everyone knows, but in that scene the monster's face is covered up, so you don't get seen properly. And then when they have this scene where we finally see him, he does something really unusual, is he walks into the room backwards, which is obviously completely unnatural, and then slowly turns around. So yeah, James Whale was really like taking his time with how he's going to show you this thing, this kind of terrifying image. And then when he does, it does the 3 cuts, like you said, which kind of emphasizes it even more.
Yeah, man, and it's really effective as well, I think, of a reveal of the horror, I guess. And I try to put myself in that position too, like of the 30s or whatever and stuff, and it must have been like pretty groundbreaking, I suppose.
Yeah, when you were mentioning The Simpsons earlier, I was just thinking about the fact that just that image of the monster, it's kind of probably has lost a lot of its edge now, just because we've seen it so much. You've been exposed to it from cartoons you watched when you were 5 years old.
Yeah, man, it's like 100 years.
This kind of imagery from a very young age. So, yeah, I think it is very important to kind of put yourself into the mindset of someone in 1931 sitting down for, how long's the film? An hour. It's really short, isn't it? It's an hour and 10.
Man. 70 minutes.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely perfect for me. It's like, I would sign a petition that's been like, that should be the movie's like standard length, like drop the 90-minute thing, go back to the 70. And the thing that's funny as well about like that thing, because when I was watching it, obviously it was like 70 minutes, pretty short film. But then when I actually watched the film, then I was like, I could totally tell where, the extra 20 minutes, if it was made today anyway, like, and it was 90 minutes, I could kind of tell where they would add that extra 20 minutes in there. Maybe not needlessly, but I don't think they do it fine in the film and stuff like that. But the thing I like as well about it, and a lot of those old school films as well, is that they don't really let up when they start. I've already kind of mentioned this to you, like obviously not today, but it kind of feels like all those films just like begin in the final third of the story, and then they just don't ease off on the momentum kind of thing, just keep you entertained like right throughout, which again is like something I prefer compared to a lot of like modern cinema.
Yeah, I think that part of the problem with today is a lot of directors still try to do that thing of entering into Act 3, but then the film itself is 3 hours long.
Yeah,
It doesn't have the same punch, It's not going to work in the same way at all.
Yeah, man. Scorsese would like the Irishman.
I've not seen that. I'm sure it's good. I mean,
it is good, man. It's just it's not. I've not spoken to anybody that sat down and watched it in a oneer,
Right. Not like this film.
Yeah, man. This is good enough just to put it right back to the start and watch it again.
Yeah, I think it really shows the efficiency of the style of the whole thing. There's no wasted shots. There's no wasted scene. Everything's just very efficient and does exactly what it needs to do. I mean, for example, later in the film, Dr. Frankenstein kind of shows remorse for what he's done. but it's quite a quick scene, and you don't really need any more than that.
Yeah. And what you're saying as well about the way that it's actually styled, I actually picked up on this too when I was watching it, because, I mean, for me as well, that I've always got this total mad, like, romanticism of, like, black and white, like, monochrome, anything that's that, then I'm sold. Like, I remember, for yourself, again, obviously anyone listening won't know this, that there was that photographer, I can't remember the guy's name, man, that used did that black and white photos of America and stuff like that.
Rob, the Americans, yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, so it's like when I was watching the film, I was like, it's just everything is always central. Like it's to the point where it was like so slick that if somebody, and it's long shots as well, you've got like, especially like even at the start with that like gravedigger guy that's like, you know, does his job, lights the match somehow, you know, smokes it, and he walks away. But he's always like the camera, even all these shots where the camera's moving, it's always, there's always like, if you push pause like on any frame, then it would be a photograph that I would hang up on a wall in my house. You know, it's just like everything's like totally, there's just, I don't know, there's just something about every single sort of shot that's, everything's just, there's always something, you know, that's like artistic, that's just really, really like, I don't know, as I say, I don't know all this sort of stuff too well, but
No,
for me,
you're absolutely right. I think I'm just looking up. So the director of photography was Arthur Edison, and I think cinematographers, directors of photography, they want to do that. Like you said, they want to make sure that every frame of a shot can work in that way. You know, I mean, I've heard cinematographers. I think it was Wally Pfister who did a lot of work with Christopher Nolan. He was talking about, for these kind of long shots that you're talking about, you know, they try and make sure that the opening and end frame were just perfectly composed, so that everything in between that, you're just trying to maintain the composition throughout. And it's difficult, you know, when you've got things moving and, you know, people coming in and out of shot, and especially if you've kind of committed to the style where you're not really editing so much, cutting to close-ups and things like that, then it's it's something to behold.
Yeah, man, it's just that anything. I think anything that, it's particularly in that sort of style with these horror themes as well. And if it's like, as you say, like all this black and white stuff, then I'm sold on that kind of thing. Because I kind of feel like like the way that this, like I suppose that all those sort of contrasted like shadows and stuff like that as well actually makes you feel the story. If that, I don't know if that actually makes any sense. But that's kind of like, you know, the way that I was kind of feeling like going into it and stuff too. Especially like, as I say, like even on those opening shots in the graveyard and stuff like that as well, when it's like panning round, and it's obviously a set, but like the way that the headstones all are like crooked and the shadows off them, and then there's like that, I don't know, reminding me of like the thing from Indiana Jones, man, that like statue, like a skeleton or whatever it is. It's like the back, maybe death or something. I don't know what that was. But then like just to go off. On one tangent here as well, I suppose, that when like the Hammer horror sort of Silver Age of the films came in, they were obviously in colour, then the way that they actually did that as well, like in The Mummy and stuff, like when they go into his tomb or whatever the fuck it's called there, that it's all like this green and purple labs with all these like different colours and like vibrant, you know, colours and test tubes and stuff. So I'm kind of a bit of a walking contradiction with all that, because I kind of love that stuff too, but the black and white and stuff's probably more into all that kind of stuff there, like.
Yeah, well, I was saying about you know, different approaches to horror, because I can't remember. Have you seen Nosferatu, the F.W. Murnau film?
Yeah, yeah, I have. I have seen it a while ago and stuff, and I remember it being completely. I remember thinking it was absolutely awesome. Some of the stuff that comes up, obviously, you know, when it's like the dialogue that flashes up, and it's like I'm going on about going into the land of, like, farewell Lee, I am, or farewell, I'm away into the land of phantoms and robbers or something like that, and there's all this like cool stuff. But it was pretty intense, like trying to follow it for me anyway.
Yeah, I mean, what I was going to say is they used quite a lot of interesting techniques in that film, and one of the techniques they used was that they wanted the horse and carriage to appear very supernatural, and the way they did that actually was with the use of fast motion.
I was going to say,
it's funny to think that later on that became just seen as a very comedic thing. It's just an interesting point about you know, cinema history. I mean, cinema's only been around for about 150 years at this point, and it's still developing. So it's kind of interesting that what can be seen as scary in one decade can be seen as ridiculous in another. We're still evolving.
Pretty much getting parodied and stuff too. But yeah, when I is again one of the things that totally jumped out to me, like when he gets picked up and goes in the horse and carriage, that it is fast motion. That is, at the time I was just kind of like, and like you say, for it being comical, that was kind of my reaction to it, like what's going on. But yeah, then as you say, like it's meant to be supernatural. This thing's like absolutely flying through the through the countryside over all the things. But yeah, it doesn't really pay off as such, 100-odd years later, but at the time, for sure, I can see that being like totally groundbreaking and stuff. But that's kind of how I felt like with Frankenstein as well. Like we're talking about, if you go back into putting yourself in the like seats of these people in like 1931, there is actually some pretty graphic horror. When you think about like it's even starting off with like from like the grave robbing, and then you see that like a body of a guy that's been hanged. I mean, it doesn't land like now for us to watch it. It seems tame, but if you think about that on paper as well, if there's going to be like a person like hung that's going to be there, and obviously like Fritz, pretty nimble wee climber for a hunchback, goes away up there as well. Which I mean, even for him, like having a deformed hunchback was probably pretty shocking at the time and stuff too. And then obviously later on, you've got all this stuff with like the girl's body getting carried and. Again, we've obviously had our edges dulled with all this kind of stuff, but I think, as I say, that if you're writing like a horror script now and you include those things and like this is what it's going to do, then it'd still be pretty shocking. It would obviously you would try and deliver it, I guess, in a different way nowadays to get that sort of the reaction. But yeah, like back there in that time, then I imagine that being pretty intense on an audience.
Yeah, I think James Whale's very good at just taking something like a hanging man or just the girl's limp body being carried by her father. Just a very simple image that sort of gives you that sort of chill down your spine,
Yeah.
Without it being overly graphic or gratuitous or things like that, which he probably could have pushed things a little bit further because this is before the censorship code and all that came in. But yeah, I think it lands just right,
Yeah, man. I've kind of got like a wee bit I was looking up as well about the censorship thing, which if I can just find that there just now too. It was actually like, it was basically that it was after the release of Dracula and Frankenstein that Hollywood seemed to actually really like crack down on that code and stuff about what was acceptable and what wasn't. Essentially because of this like upsurge in like sex and violence in motion pictures, and then as they adopted the Hays Code, which I know that you were talking about before with me and stuff like that too, which was sort of more of a Catholic influenced code of standards. The thing with Frankenstein as well that's bizarre, I guess now looking back too, that there was like state by state censorship through a thing that I think was called the states' rights system. So the titles were actually sold directly, like territory by territory, to local distributors. But that then meant that the state censorship boards could insist on their own cuts of the movies. So obviously there's like these states that cut scenes. Obviously, like we're talking about, like the one that's intense there, with like the monster and Maria getting chucked in the water and all that kind of stuff. So that gets cut. And some other places as well, like. Made them cut the stuff with Colin Clive, like when he compares himself to God and stuff like that. Yeah. So there is, you can kind of, and I know like before we were kind of had a wee sort of discussion about this too, and you can kind of tell that there's been a bit of, I wouldn't say he had one hand tied behind his back with some of the stuff, but you can tell the studio was kind of intervened maybe on some of the stuff, particularly I think like towards the end, which I suppose we'll discuss in a bit, like when we actually get there.
Yeah, just to follow on from what you were saying by state, I'm not sure if you got this little nugget, but Kansas requested the cutting of 32 scenes, which if they had been removed would have cut a literal half of the film. Yeah, so the film would have been 35 minutes in Kansas.
No, I didn't see that.
Exactly a night out. Yeah, that was information from Wikipedia.
Oh man. Yeah, no, I don't think that'd be. What? So did they actually? What? So did they actually cut it, or they just what? Just went nah?
They requested it, and then the censor representative Joseph Breen urged them to reconsider. Eventually, an edited version was released in Kansas, which I assume was some sort of compromise, not a 35-minute version.
It's like we half hour.
Another state. It's like, oh, did you see Frankenstein? Oh yeah, man, pretty short film, huh? 35 minutes. 71. What? Then like, I don't know, under cover of night, sneaking into another state just to see it.
Yeah. Aye, man. That was just add to its notoriety though as well, eh?
Yeah, exactly.
There's a whole thing like going on with that, like just talking about all those things with like censorship and stuff too. That there's all these things with like freaks and stuff like that wasn't, it got banned over here, I think, until like the 60s or something. It was like a really long time that all these things were like banned and stuff as well before that, obviously there was a big, but with this crackdown that was going on, there was just like, I don't know. I don't think it was particularly attached to just like cinema too, because there's obviously quite a lot of literature and the pulp like comics, I guess, and stuff that were coming out too. There's obviously maybe a bit intense, starting to warp these young children's minds. They think they're going to be, going on killing sprees or something like that. There was that thing actually where I read that thing in the book as well, where they were talking about that in Glasgow, where there was like hundreds of children ended up thinking there was a vampire in the Gorbals, so they went out with their crucifixes and like knives and stuff like that, trying to kill a vampire that didn't exist. So I think that was like the UK sort of like the intervention, I guess, that came across there. I'm going, nah, these need to do something about these kids, man.
Yeah.
But going back to Frankenstein too, is the bit that kind of got me as well, with like Edward Van Sloan. Like obviously we're on about him being like, this, I guess him being known as an actor at the time, coming out doing his whole speech at the beginning and stuff like that. And then it's like when he actually gets introduced in the film as Dr. Volman, it's like when he first came on as well, man, I was like, you reminded me of like Scrooge McDuck or something like that. I don't know if was he supposed to be Scottish?
I assume some sort of Germanic. Well, this is set in Geneva, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's just weird. Like his accent, it was like all over the kind of place and stuff like that.
Well, yeah, it's probably just. This was probably the days before you had these like Liam Neeson types who are just like, I'm not doing an accent. You're probably like, you are doing an accent. He's like, I can't do an accent. Well, do one anyway.
It's going to land somewhere between German and Scottish.
Yeah, it didn't stick out to me as Scottish, but yeah, potentially that's what he was going for.
It just kind of was like a bit jarring when I was watching it and stuff. And I didn't know too if there was this whole like Scottish vibe, because in the book there's like Scotland seems to actually be attached to the story like quite a bit and stuff too. I think Mary Shelley actually like based some of the stuff like when she was in Dundee, which is obviously just like a hop and a skip away from us, kind of where we grew up and stuff. But in the novel, like Frankenstein ends up in Perth randomly, and then goes to like a Scottish island where he actually has this like big face-off with the monster and stuff like that. Because it's effectively where he's supposed to be going to actually like basically build himself a bride.
I can't remember if this was in the Kenneth Branagh adaptation. I saw that once when I was about 14. Don't really remember much about it, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen parts of it too, and I probably sound like an asshole, but everybody that I speak to is just like, yeah, don't bother with that. It's pretty rubbish. So I'm just like, well, I've heard it enough times, so and as I say, it's not 70 minutes long, so I'm not watching it.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I thought that like in like this one as well, that the whole lab scene was pretty wild, and I don't know, just like the way, and it's obviously a set, but just the way that the whole like watchtower is like constructed, that the way that the lines of the stones like totally all off, and as you mentioned as well, that the walls are like leaning at these like exaggerated angles and stuff, that it just feels like pretty uncomfortable too.
More of the German expressionist influence, I think.
Yeah,
we're talking about the It's Alive scene, right?
Yeah. Basically all that stuff when they're in that whole area and stuff. Because I know that they said it was like that James Whale was quite in that particular sort of areas like inspired by like the cabinet of Dr. Caligari or something, is it?
All right, yeah, of course, yeah.
And I like that there's like how the electricity is kind of gets used as this like key to life in the film too. Rather than, you know, a lot of films when they go on about this sort of stuff, it's always like black magic or something that gets involved and stuff. And I guess it's like the monster itself isn't a reanimated corpse that's actually, you know, constructed from various pieces of various dead bodies and stuff like that. Which is, you know, sort of that ties in with the book. I know that there's a lot of like stuff that's different in the film and stuff too, but it's meant to obviously be that the Victor, or Henry as he's called in the film, is building this like new species that's, you know, 8 foot tall or whatever. And I guess that they kind of try as well, before we say that you actually get the reveal on Karloff as well, that they maybe like allude to the monster being like huge, and the fact that when he's lying on the table, it's like he's got size 16 feet or something, man.
Yeah.
Picked up on that.
Yeah, it's interesting you were saying about the changing of the names, because this film is based on the original Mary Shelley novel, but it's also based on a play adaptation by Peggy Webling from 1927. But I wasn't able to find the script for that, so I'm not really sure
what was
how
taken
much from that, or how much are just original ideas.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was saying, like we were talking before, but this is like the original. I think that must be then what I was talking about at the start, with them actually like putting down some money on that, and then you know, like Robert Florey wanting to do his own sort of treatment for the film and stuff too. So then I don't know too, like how much then he changed from that, and how much James Whale changed from what he'd sort of come up with as well. So that's certainly something that we should probably be looking into. But
yeah, I mean, the names thing is strange. So the doctor who creates the monster is called Henry Frankenstein instead of Victor Frankenstein, like in the book. Yeah. But there's a guy called Victor who is his friend, who's a separate character.
His best friend is trying to get in with his missus for reasons.
Some friend.
Oh, man.
So yeah, it's just a strange little twist on things. I mean, it's one of these changes that I would say is unnecessary, maybe, because I think there were enough characters in the original novel that you could have just given them different motivations, you know?
Yeah.
Different things to do. But maybe the reason they don't do that is because they don't want people who are fans of the book to get outraged. You know, it's just like, let's take it in a different direction.
Yeah, I guess it's, yeah. I mean, fair enough if he's like, oh yeah, Henry Frankenstein's you know, that works better, or maybe for whatever his reason's better for it too. But the fact it's like a direct swap between two characters' names and stuff as well is a bit of a confusing one.
Yeah, because it was Henry in the book as well, who was his best friend. So I don't know why they've done that switch, but maybe just to try and make it feel more original, a new take or something.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, it makes sense. I did like as well, like in the film too, or like when you talk about horror films in general, like you have all these stories of like the dead that are getting brought back to life, and the corpses are always extremely unhappy, you know, about coming back to life. You know, considering for us that, you know, when we're alive, then this whole thought about being able to cheat death is probably something that we'd all be pretty happy about too. But then we end up, you know, as humans writing these stories, and the dead are always extremely unhappy when they come back, you know, for like, you know, films like in Pet Sematary and stuff like that too, where they're, you know, Reanimator, where they're really unhappy about it. You know what I mean?
Well, maybe that much better.
They was, right?
Maybe the
afterlife's
better.
Yeah, man. But I guess with like Frankenstein, the monster's not actually really brought back from the dead, rather than just, you know, straight up created. And obviously there's the whole thing about having this abnormal brain put in his head. It's the brain of a criminal. And that's, yeah, like that whole thing. I didn't realise that, like, how much young Frankenstein actually took from the movie. You know, they've got like the abnormal brain. And this the stuff with like Fritz, like when he's climbing up the stairs and he's got this like small, like he's got his wee walking stick and all that kind of stuff. That's like what, you know, like Marty Feldman. I know they did it, taking completely parodied and stuff too, but I didn't realise that just how much they just straight up lifted out of the original one to put into to that film and stuff.
Yeah, they did. I mean, one thing I noticed that's quite strange is, I mean, I don't mean any disrespect to the actors May Clarke or John Boles, who played Elizabeth Lavenza or Victor Moritz. But it's just like some of the acting seems a little bit off. It almost seems like parody, especially the scenes with those two together.
Yeah.
But looking at those scenes, it's kind of easy to see what was maybe the jumping off point for young Frankenstein. You know, you could imagine, you know, Gene Wilder and all these guys finding it quite amusing, you know, and I guess Mel Brooks thinking, oh, well, it's not that hard to kind of just twist this a little further.
Yeah, totally. It's like when I was watching it too, when you're talking about like May Clarke and stuff, that I did actually kind of like the way that like that performance. But again, I know what you're saying. It's probably it's like exaggerated sort of theatrical stage sort of acting, I guess, more than more subtle stuff that we're used to now, But
I mean, part down to the length of the film, because they have to get so much in so quickly, you know. Yeah. So maybe it's just that you're this mood, then you're this mood, then you're this mood.
I think that as well, and I don't know, she maybe came into this film pretty late, because I know that it was James Whale that basically cast her. If he was only getting announced as the director, like, you know, pretty late on or whatever, he cast her like straight away. I think he worked with her previously that got her in. But I also kind of thought, like, when I was watching it, and again, it might just be the style at the time of when these films were sort of getting done too, that like for her had like the vibes of like Madeline from White Zombie. I don't know if you've like watched that recently or at all as well. Like, but it kind of, I guess I could be just reading like way too much into that sort of comparison, especially with like Whale trying to get, well, with Lugosi sort of being involved with us at a certain point too, but having that like sort of heroine sort of maybe like looking that way. But I mean, I suppose it's the thing as well where like for her that her performance, I mean, overall probably doesn't get mentioned so much compared to like Colin, Clive and Boris Karloff and stuff like that. I mean, I don't know if we're acting subtle as such to be in the background, but I did when I was actually like making an effort to pay attention to her performances and stuff like that. And as I say, it's maybe like a bit theatrical or hammed up or whatever and stuff like that. But I mean, I did like it and stuff.
Yeah, I didn't just either. It's just it occurred to me that it wouldn't be too hard to take that style of acting and just lean into it even more for comedic effect. Yeah,
totally. I'm trying to think what I was going to say there and stuff too. Like, sorry, just to go back there, like I was talking about the abnormal brain and stuff too. That's one of the things that in the film it didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Like, I know that they sort of, it was maybe supposed to be they explain the monster's behaviour, but at the same time, you know, it's kind of like, well, this thing, I suppose, essentially doesn't have a soul, and when he brings it to life, the first sort of experience it has is getting tormented with fire and whipped. So, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think our sympathy is mostly with the monster throughout the film. I mean, most of his choices seem fairly justified by today's standards. Maybe the reason they had to have that abnormal brain thing in there is just because he goes to the extent of trying to kill his creator. And it's like, oh, well, no normal person would do that. But I think if you're pushed to that extreme like he was, they might. It's,
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I was wanting to talk about the famous "It's Alive" scene because I think, you know, even before knowing the story of Frankenstein, it's probably the first thing that you're kind of aware of, you know, the guy going crazy in his lab, lots of electricity, the body lying on the table, and then him manically screaming "It's alive." So it's kind of interesting to see the original take on that after seeing all the parodies or homages.
Yeah, man. The thing that whole scene, obviously it's like iconic and stuff too, but it's actually like the fact you've got like Elizabeth and then you've got this like Victor and that involvement. They're going to check up on him at this old like watchtower, and it's obviously saying, you know, he's animating dead tissue to create a monster, a huge monster. And then immediately after that, when they go back to speak to his dad, they say like, "Oh yeah, Henry's well, but he's busy." It's just like,
I mean, just from a filmmaking point of view, what was really interesting to me was obviously the film reaches this climax at that point. You know, it's alive, the whole thing works, and I was like, how are they going to get out of this scene? Like, how do you like wind this scene down? And basically, they don't. They just fade into 3 days later or something, where everyone's just used to the fact that he's reanimated this corpse, and that's fine. We'll just get on with our lives now.
Yeah. That was the thing that got me. Like, actually, like, in fact, to the point where I was actually like just thinking about that in any other setting. Like, if this, like, if you were in that thing where you go to check on your mate, and he's just like, he's just created this 8 foot tall man. You know what I mean? And it's like, yeah, that's what he does. It's that kind of guy. Just leave him be.
Yeah, in Back to the Future, where Doc Brown says, "That was the day I invented time travel," and you're kind of like, you don't really think about it that much till later on. You're like, that was the day I invented time travel. I mean, and he's so humble about it.
A throwaway comment.
Exactly.
But the thing again in Frankenstein too is then you get introduced kind of to the Baron, you know, this intense character that's like, you know, I don't know, I imagine this guy being like, as a dad, probably, you know, reminds me of like a character of like Bill and Ted, man. You know what I mean? Like Colonel Oates and stuff like that.
Well, like he's going to send some military academy.
Well, he probably did.
If he doesn't stop messing about with these dead bodies.
Man. And to be fair though, that's actually that whole, you know, again from an actual storytelling point of view, it works really well and stuff too. But it is an area where the movie again sort of diverges away from the book, because he's actually, you know, like Frankenstein's actually got a good relationship with his parents in the book and stuff. But the way I was kind of looking at it too is maybe because they're limited to this like magic 70 minutes, that it's a good way. It's maybe, I don't know, it's put in a sort of easy way to relate to maybe Henry's behaviour, I guess. It's like a good sort of quick way of being like, this is the relationship in a nutshell kind of thing or whatever. So it's not actually getting into the depths of the characters like in the way that the novel kind of does it and stuff too.
Yeah, it's just mildly antagonistic. It's like his son's been skipping school or something. He's just like, oh, when will he learn?
Oh man. So it's kind of like saying that we've got it like set up to the point where there's like a completely mad scientist toiling away with his wee deformed assistant, his old school dad, his colleague, his loving yet underappreciated fiance, and his best friend who really cares about him but also wants to steal his woman for some reason. You know.
Yeah.
But then it's like, that's going to get into the bit where we were talking about, where it's literally like the halfway point of the film, and we actually get jumped into the, you know, the suspense of the monster and the reveals like we're talking about, where there was like the jump sort of shots and stuff like that, getting, you know, beating up by Fritz and stuff like that. And then, you know, I mean, the only natural way to progress from that point is, you know, for him to start killing people.
Oh, he had me. I mean, I can't remember if we actually see Fritz's body. I think it's inferred that his neck's been broken.
Yeah, he's hung. I think he's in the background hanging.
Oh, right.
When they go in, you hear it because he screams.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I don't think they particularly rush to get there too quick. And then they go in the room, and I'm pretty sure he's like hanging somehow from like a rafter in the background with the monster. And that's when they sort of exit the room, and then you know, they basically like use one of them as bait so that Waldman, you know, can effectively euthanize the monster, which is like probably my favorite part of the whole film. When he like jumps him, he ejects him, and then he like kind of Karloff like sort of stops, and then he like randomly waves his hands and then faints.
Yeah. It was, I mean, that's probably a very sinister scene as well, you know, for the audience at the time, where it's like just the way the hand is kind of like slowly going up behind Waldman's back.
Oh yeah, like the next part. Yeah, the next bit's when he's actually on the table when he comes up. Ah, yeah, that bit for sure, man, is going to be like, yeah, he just kind of like comes to his senses and then subtly assesses the situation before taking his opportunity to just off him and then make his escape. Which I guess, kind of goes into like the sort of the last part of the movie, when I kind of felt like it was I don't know if there's any sort of continuity as such that kind of just goes out the window at that point, because effectively you've got Henry and his fiance, and that's the part where he's like, yeah, I'll marry you whenever you want, sort of thing, and it's like later that day. And this guy's like what? So I think he says something about Waldman as well, that he hadn't heard from him, and it's like, well, for how long? Like, how long has this guy been dead? Because you're going from this scene where it's like he's being killed, and then immediately going to a wedding, which is a massive event that's clearly taken a bit of time to get to. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's like Henry said, "Are you definitely going to make it to the wedding? I know you've got a monster to kill in the morning." He was like, "Yeah, don't worry, I'll have it done by 11. I won't be late."
Yeah.
Pick up some flowers on the way. It's just like everything's happening at the same time.
Yeah.
I was confused about. I sometimes miss these kind of details, but the big celebration that's going on in the streets, is that to do with the wedding?
I thought it was. That's the way I took it. I mean, you maybe put doubt in my head now, but I assumed it was because it was like the town where like the barons kind of like giving them, making everybody celebrate.
Yeah, I guess it makes sense. People are getting married and all that, and yeah, it's good because I guess that gives the you cut between that and the scene with the girl Maria that the monster accidentally drowns. It's quite interesting to have this kind of party scene going on, and then this very calm scene by a river, and you just know things are going to go wrong.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's definitely like a total chilling sort of. Again, maybe not by today's standards and that, but yeah, for sure. Like when you think, oh man, and I don't know, this is a thing as well. I'm sure it's not just for parents too, but anything that seems to involve kids that are getting, murdered or even accidentally killed and stuff in this, because it's effectively that is the thing in the film where it's like Maria's like the first person who doesn't, she's not repulsed by him. Effectively, that kind of shows him some sort of humanity, and then he ultimately accidentally kills her, as well. So, but for me, like, yeah, when it comes involved with like anything to do with like kids getting murdered and stuff, man, I find that pretty. I don't know. It doesn't sit well with me till my fucking worst nightmare, like,
Yeah, it's a very distressing thing. I guess it's interesting as well that the monster is seen as being very kind towards her, and him throwing her into the river, it's not malicious at all.
Yeah.
So it's another funny thing where the abnormal brain doesn't really factor into it.
Yeah, totally. I guess, yeah. I think in the whole thing in the book too is, the part where the monster kind of goes out, and he kind of, because the film doesn't involve all the stuff, like which Young Frankenstein obviously had all like some amazing scenes, with like the blind guy and stuff. That's sort of in the book as well, and that's kind of how the monster then he spends time sort of observing a family. And that's how he learns how to speak and develops his language and all that kind of stuff, which is how obviously in the film, because it's done in like a really condensed way too, that makes sense there that he wouldn't actually be able to talk. But yeah, that whole scene, I'm trying to think there, my brain's kind of gone a bit blank, like after that, because I'm not sure, does it just cut back to the wedding there? And then effectively that's when the dad sort of comes with carrying the child.
Yeah, I think so. One thing I was going to say, just another filmmaking technique which may have been accidental, is that in the shots in the street where the camera's on a dolly, the camera is actually quite shaky, and I think that might have been a limitation of the technology at the time, but it kind of adds something. It just gives us like instability to the whole film at that point, which contrasts quite well with the calm scene by the river.
Yeah, I never picked up on that, but that's quite cool. I need to go back and watch it. I could do it. I mean, after talking about this as well, man, I'm definitely going to go back and watch it again just to sort of pick up on some things too. I know there was a thing that you mentioned me that I don't even know how I missed as well, with like the headphones.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that stuck out is that it's sort of an indistinct era. So the film was probably shot in 1930, I guess, and it's based on a book that came out in 1818, sorry, and a play from 1927. It seems like things are a little bit jumbled because whenever you see Frankenstein's lab or the university lecture hall, things feel very modern. You know, Dr. Frankenstein's got a pair of headphones. They look like they're Sennheisers or something.
That's what I was going to say, man.
1910.
Yeah. When you sent me that picture,
oversight or not.
Yeah, I was going to say, when you sent me that picture, that was like the first thing that jumped in my head. It's like, is he wearing a pair of Sennheisers?
I mean, they'll probably use that for their advertiser at some point. But yeah, I don't know if it's because then when you see people in the village, or just if you consider the clothes and things people are wearing, it seems more like it's the 19th century.
Yeah.
But I don't know if they decided to. One thing I thought maybe they were trying to do is try to create more of a gulf between the commoners and the, let's say, masters of the universe, you know, the scientists who are like leading the way progressively, you know, just to have more of a divide between them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Thing I don't think many people would care about, but I noticed it.
Yeah, I didn't notice it at all. Like, but when you sent me that picture, I was like, man, the picture would be actually like, you know, as you say, like if that's taken straight up, like a frame from the film too, it goes again, like I was saying, like an actual photograph. It's like a really cool poster for a gig. A party.
Yeah, I was thinking as well. You saying that Fritz is in the background hanging, that's really interesting because that means that there's the repeated image. There's the guy hanging at the start, and then there's a skeleton hanging at the university, and then there's him hanging, you know? It just
sure.
Image a few times, and it's interesting that because he kind of interacts with the hanging skeleton, it's sort of that's what he's going to become shortly.
Yeah, and he's the one that cuts down the body too, eh? At the start.
Live by the sword, die by the sword. But yeah, that was just another thing as well. When Fritz was kind of skulking around in the university lab, it's like something to me fell off, and I realized it's because he looks like he's from a different time period than that lab, which looks like it was probably just, I don't know, maybe a spare room they had at the back of Universal Pictures, maybe a room or something.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. They're like, just I'm like picturing it in my head just when you were saying about the skeleton too, and you're completely right. It's like the way he's dressed and stuff, like going about there, and the way that I think even when the students are in the thing, like in my head, they don't seem to be dressed like total 19th century, and I could be wrong, but just the way I'm kind of picturing it in my head too, that could be completely. But I think I don't know how like back in the day with these attention to details and stuff too. There's actually like a few. I think there was a couple of mistakes in the film as well. There's one actually with like the Baron where he's talking about his son, and he refers to him like hanging about in an old windmill. But he's, you know, because I think originally they were going to use the windmill as where he did the, you know, where he created the monster and all that kind of stuff. But he's in a watchtower. And then obviously at the end, it's the windmill where they end up and stuff. So it kind of was obviously at some point they changed that and just left it in the film, I guess.
Yeah, it takes like that. There's an interesting thing where it's like every generation is exposed to more images and films and things, you know. So generation is kind of more like less willing to accept these sort of mistakes. But if you think about it, in the 1930s, you usually only saw a film once. Like VHS and all that wasn't even around at that point.
Yeah.
No way to really rewatch a film unless you go to cinema again. But even then, I don't think people would have cared that much about something like that. And the studio probably knew that. They were like, oh, it doesn't really make sense, but just let it go. Like 2% of people will notice this. And that's
the same as like when they were doing Die Hard, and it was like when they wrote the thing when it was like how are they going to escape and stuff, and it was like, you know, at the back of their escape out the van that comes out the back or something like that, and then you're saying like at the start when all the guys, you see them coming out the back of this lorry and there's no van, and then the director's just like, well, you know, if anybody says, well, you know, an hour ago I noticed that there was nothing in the back of there and stuff. He's just like, I don't care if someone notices that kind of thing. Yeah, well, good for you, sort of thing. So I guess as well, we were talking about the shots. Like, I'm thinking about other sort of those older films from around like in the 1930s and stuff too. And yeah, they're really comparatively rough. You know, the cuts especially. You can like as in it's not that they're cutting from one scene to another, but it's an actual shot. It's like they've obviously cut the shot and then done another take. But the guy's not. But people aren't standing specifically in exactly the same spot, and you can tell they've moved. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're all kind of bouncing around a few inches.
So there's I didn't really pick up on any of that obviously in this film. So I mean I have like no criticism really about the way it looks at all. And then yeah, there's just obviously cut them some slack, like, you know.
No, I mean, I'm just looking at these stills again. It was like you were saying earlier about the way it plays with shadow. It's they really, especially in things like the cemetery sequence, it's layers of light. You know, you'll have something in the foreground that's lit, then a layer of darkness, then a character silhouetted, then a character that you can see, then a statue silhouetted, and then a bright background with, you know, the dark sky. And yeah, it's quite amazing.
I know, it's like they put the effort into like actually building those sets as well and getting it. Like, that's the thing that I love, I think, about most about all those old films. Like, we're going about, like, when I talk about like the romantic aspect of it all and stuff, that's kind of what plays into it. It's not, you know, I mean, it's not on location or whatever, like stuff like that. You can tell it's a set and they've built it and stuff, but it's the way that it's, I guess, layered, like you're talking about, that just seems to add something to it, especially for like myself and that's not trained in that sort of thing compared to you.
Maybe sort of create the illusion of depth when you know that the set's probably not actually that big, you know, but it has the feeling that it could sort of extend off forever.
Yeah, totally. I did like that whole thing with, like, I don't know why jumping right back to the start of it there though, but the gravedigger, like, that guy seemed to have, you know, I would expect to have that guy's name on the poster, man. He's like got one of the he's got one of the most I know, he's on shot for ages the way he does it, and it's like he's actually got quite a lot of obviously directing to be like, right, this is what you're going to do, mate. You've got your shovel, you're going to pat on the earth there that you've got your mound on the, you know, then you're going to stop, you're going to have a little pause for yourself, you're going to light, you know, your match, light your cigarette or your pipe or whatever he's got, and then like sling it over his shoulder, and then you're going to walk off, not in a straight line, curve around, but still in shot, and then, you know what I mean, man? It's just like, that was when I first was like, man, I knew this was going to be good. You know, just the way that this was being framed.
I think it's the sort of revealing of information as well, because I guess audiences even now probably think that the first person you see in a film is potentially the person that you're going to be following for the film.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a sort of little bit of a red herring. It's like you're with this guy for a while. Oh, this must be about him. And then actually, no, pan over to these guys hiding behind a fence.
just slightly, like 10 feet away.
Yeah.
But even then as well, you kind of, totally, man, you might think there's like going to be some sort of interaction or something between like them and stuff, with them actually stealing it, but then, they make it pretty easy. Just go.
Pay them off.
They've done that, man. He'd be like, you don't even need to fill the earth in, mate. You could just left that for us.
Yeah, but you know, in case someone noticed.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at some general notes I made. So I said earlier that in the reveal scene, there's a lack of music, but there's actually quite a lack of music throughout the film.
I
mostly noticed the score being present during the celebration in the town. Right.
Okay. Yeah, because I didn't. That's one of the things I kind of thought afterwards, that I didn't think there was any score at all. Like, I didn't really pick up on it. It was, obviously now you're saying like the music and stuff when they're doing like their party, but it's kind of, it kind of works though, it's just like the complete silence. That's like, I don't know, I mean, it works building up that tension more so than like when you would expect the jump scares that you get like sort of more modern like sort of horrors, I guess, when you kind of, you know, you expect there's something going on there in the background. I guess I suppose as well you can do it right with when you're using a score to actually like sort of use that as a tool to get a reaction or to create something for sure. But yeah, I totally liked it. I like that vibe when there's like nothing and you're kind of just sitting in silence watching it, and it's like this crazy stuff that's going on. It's the story, I suppose, as much as that's like the thing that's so like amazing about it for me.
You have to consider all the things that are happening, you know, because it's so sort of eerily peaceful. You just have to sit and consider, this man's just brought back someone from the dead. this monster's just thrown a girl into a river and she can't swim. Things like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, man. I think that. Did you read the book at all? I don't know if you were saying that because
I've never read it. I read some kind of illustrated edition when I was in primary school, but that's going back a couple of years.
yeah.
But the illustrations were good from what I remember.
Yeah. No, it isn't. I mean, I love it, man. It's like it's great. And then there's things I kind of was looking into this as well. I didn't actually realise that. And I mean, I suppose like with Mary Shelley and everything, it's like quite amazing to get into her life, which we won't do. But you know, it was like originally they published it in like 1818, like a small run, like 500 copies or something like that, and it didn't go down well at all. I suppose at the time, like with the whole, must have been quite a rebel, I suppose, with like the subject matter that she's talking about. But I think that the reviews of it and stuff was like saying it was a tissue of horrible and disgusting absurdity. And then I think it was like the first sort of stage adaptation was like 1823. It's like a musical melodrama by, I think it was a guy called Richard Brinsley Peakes. So it was like Presumption or The Fate of Frankenstein, and then Shelley ended up. She wrote a revision of the novel in 1831, and then diluted the moral and religious complexities of the central characters to make it more in keeping with the stage adaptations and stuff. And then obviously from there, it's just become like one of the best, like referred to like classic cult books like of all time sort of thing. So it's yeah, man. It's just I don't know, man. It's just definitely there's something about this whole thing, and I guess that's why like with this we were going to be discussing all sorts of films and too. But Frankenstein felt like a really good jumping off point for getting into horror and stuff as well, particularly where we've got that. I guess the story, the sort of the iconic imagery that comes with it, and then you're talking about like all the sort of cinematography and stuff like that as well. It's just I don't know, it's just an absolute classic thing. And I guess as well for like in terms of like for horror movies, then it was like Dracula, Frankenstein, you know, the movies that kind of got all the sort of pound sign or the dollar signs, I guess, in the eyes of like all the film companies that knew that there was going to be an audience for horror. And then obviously without question totally catapulted Lugosi and Karloff into stardom and horror icons and stuff, you know. And I think that like for James Whale too, man, I think he went and him and Karloff worked together and stuff like the old Dark House and stuff afterwards too, like the next year I think it was. I remember just having a quick look through his IMDb and stuff like that.
Yeah, I've wanted to see the old Dark House for a while actually. Yeah, I wanted to speak for a second about the assistant character, who in this is called Fritz. So obviously he's not in the original novel, and he actually first appeared in the adaptation you're talking about, Presumption.
He was on this, right?
Yeah, and then just a strange sort of piece of trivia is that the Fritz character somehow then became known as Igor in later adaptations, and no one seems to really be sure of how that happened, if it was just seen as a sort of typical name from that period or something.
Right, okay.
But yeah, it's unclear, because I think in all of the parodies you generally see, that character is called Igor. There's always a kind of Igor type. I remember this cartoon called Count Duckula. I think he had an assistant called Igor.
Yeah, classic, man.
So yeah, I don't know what happened to Fritz. They should have brought him back.
I was trying to think there. I was reading stuff too. This was maybe a while ago. There's something in my head about that like, I don't know if I'm trying to think if it was actually the source of why that came about and too, because I know it's got something to do with like, I think Mel Brooks and like Young Frankenstein had something like the sort of piss take they had, like with obviously the play on it, like when they're obviously he says like his name's Frankenstein and he says his name's not Igor, it's Igor, sorry, it's Igor or whatever he says and stuff. But I'm sure there's some sort of context to that as well that's to do with the name. You could be totally right, man, as well. Maybe it's just like, I don't know, like just people saying like, oh, check out that. Well, Igor. Yeah, I'll need to look into that too.
What's really interesting is the character that Henry Frankenstein, played by Colin Clive, undergoes, because it's kind of strange in a way. So when you meet him, he's beyond ambitious. He is quite clearly mad. But then over the course of the film, he goes from madness to sanity to regret, and then finally to determination to right the wrongs that he's caused by bringing this thing to life.
Yeah,
and it's quite unusual. I can't really think of many films where that would happen. And even, you'll have to correct me on this, but in the novel, I guess he's not completely mad as it begins. It's more about pushing things further and further, and how far can he go in this sort of field of medicine.
Yeah, he's just pretty much. I think he's more obsessed about like creating this and immediately regrets it when he does, sort of thing, and then sort of becomes depressed, and then that's where it's more like the monster's kind of like pursuing him and tormenting him and stuff, and it's kind of like the monster basically wants him to build a female for him so that they can just disappear together, and because he's made him so like he's even repulsive to himself, I think, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, he's like, you owe me, but you've made me. I don't want to, you know what I mean? And then that's why it's sort of this pursuit. And then effectively, it's when he like goes to Scotland and there's a whole showdown, and then he basically refuses to do it because he's like, well, if I build another one, then they might effectively mate and then create more of the species that are going to be a plague on the earth, kind of thing, and he can't let that happen. So then it kind of ends up sort of going down with like the monsters then going to sort of bide his time and seek revenge and basically kill everybody that he loves, you know. And then it just kind of goes down with it. That's it. It's like it ends up just sort of being, Victor Frankenstein and the monster in this like pursuit to the end, basically, you know.
Yeah.
Which is really.
I was looking at the writing credits here. There's quite a few. I mean, for the screenplay alone, there's Francis Edward Farrago, Garrett Fort, Robert Florey, as you mentioned before, John Russell. The latter two were both uncredited, but the story was by John L. Balderston and Richard Scher, and then obviously based on the original novel by Mary Shelley and the aforementioned play by Peggy Webling. So yeah, quite a few writers to get us to the event we got.
Yeah, man. I think just a mention there too. Does it not have like Mary Shelley? It's like not based on the novel by Mary Shelley. Is it not like her husband's name? Like it's not even her name that's on the start of the film or something.
Yeah, I actually didn't come across that. That's quite interesting.
Yeah, no. There's times no feminism back then, man.
I mentioned at the start the thing where it brings up the cast. You just have a question mark for Karloff, because I was wondering how that would actually work, because I think legally they'd have to credit him. So then at the end you get the cast list as well with a little notice, something like a great cast is worth celebrating or something like that.
I didn't see that bit, but I noticed at the end his name was there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like as I was talking about just in the film where he like goes as well to try and like win, like to right his wrong. I kind of felt like that was a part in the film too near the end where it's like they're obviously, especially after Maria gets killed and stuff, and they're basically, the town's just like, right, we've got to go kill this. I don't know if they're not really, is that not like the first time they're kind of aware of the monster? It's not like he's skulking about for ages and they're all trying to seek him out. They just basically decide, right, we're going to go kill this guy or this thing. And then, but this, it seems pretty chilled, man, that they're basically like, that, Henry doesn't get any sort of static off them at all, considering he's the guy that's created this, you know what I mean? You think that they'd be like, well, you've created, what, you just decided to create a giant man?
Yeah, I can't really get into all that. So it's the way I remember it is it's Maria's father brings the body to the town, and then the mayor basically mobilizes everyone.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure. Did the mayor know what Henry had done, or no?
Yeah, that's why my mind's drawn a blank there again about that.
I'm sure that wasn't really addressed. I mean,
that's maybe just something that might come to like, or maybe that'll be a secret.
Yeah.
Created it. But then it's obviously like kind of going on about like where it's kind of like the continuity sort of goes out the window a bit with just with, I guess they start hunting like that. This is what I was talking about earlier. It was like a 70-minute movie, and it's going to get to the bit like if it was now and it was going to be 20 minutes, then it would be that is where the extra 20 minutes would come from. It's not. I don't know if it's wrapped up pretty quick, but I guess it does. But effectively, like when they go to that windmill, or when he takes Henry hostage, and then they go to the windmill and stuff like that, then it's not like now you kind of imagine that would be like an extra 20-minute, like a hostage situation, you know what I mean? That they'd be like, right, what are we going to do there and stuff? But it kind of ends up playing out pretty quick.
Yeah, and I know that in this session you basically get Henry getting almost bifurcated by the windmill, the windmill being burnt down and the monster presumably dying, although we know that he obviously doesn't because there's sequels.
Yeah.
Then you cut to a happy little scene where Henry's just convalescing in bed, and you end with the Baron making, I think, the second joke he makes in the movie about booze with the help. Basically.
The help, yeah, the help in there. It's it's a bit of the whole thing is like intense, that windmill too. I know I spoke to you earlier, like the health and safety aspect of that was like they're just throwing around a flaming torch that at some point you see the flames on the ground and he actually like ends up, I think Colin Clive like actually lands in the flames like accidentally and stuff.
Someone actually grabbed it and pulled it away. Like if you look again, I think someone you don't see a hand obviously, but I think someone out of frame just managed to get it away from him.
All right, okay, I need to watch that again too.
Because it kind of leaves the frame in quite an odd way. But yeah, the health and safety is crazy throughout because people are swinging those torches wildly. But also Fritz is doing that as well in the scene where he's torturing the monster. He's nuts with this thing, and you can tell that there's not really any choreography.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's no choreography at all.
No, it's
just genuine fear by Karloff.
Yeah, just crazy. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I mean, there's the reviews at the time seem to be pretty good. I mean, I'm just looking at there's the New York Times critic Mordaunt Hall gave the film a very positive review. He said that the film aroused so much excitement at the Mayfair yesterday that many in the audience laughed to cover their true feelings.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess, yeah, he must mean nervous laughter, I'm presuming.
Yeah, totally.
No.
It's I never really looked into the reviews too much at the time, apart from, like you say, just the kind of universal sort of they kind of had the marketing sort of down with it, because I guess they would have, especially with like we're talking about like that intro at the start and then people actually walking out before it begins because they're too scared and stuff like that, sort of gets word of mouth going rather than actually paying for a huge amount of advertising, I guess, to punt it to people in the first place, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
The thing I think as well, when we go to like talk about that bit there with the windmill, when they're obviously like throwing down and stuff, I think originally, I think that's maybe one of the bits where the studio actually intervened, because I'm pretty sure that at the time the townspeople just like burned down the windmill and killed supposed to be both of them. So it's like he's dying with his creation kind of thing. But maybe I'm guessing that was maybe a step too far, like, so they just like, right, this guy, monster's just gonna, just hurl him over the side and he doesn't die. Even then you would be like, okay, he's dead, but no, apparently not.
Yeah, that's the happy ending. It feels a bit tacked on. I think the only reason it works is because the actor playing the Baron kind of sells it quite well. That you're kind of like, well, I've seen a pretty good film, and yeah, okay, fine, they want to end on a joke.
Yeah, sure. So how would you rate it overall?
I give it 5 stars. Yeah, I mean, it was kind of interesting to me to see this film after, I guess, so much hype, and just, yeah, it was also strange to realize that I'd never actually sat down and watched it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought it was a great film. I think it was definitely a good choice for our debut podcast.
Yeah, man.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the greatest dance-off of 1931. Those out there, if you want to go to 50 minutes and 40 seconds of this film after watching it the first time, in which case you'll have already seen this, so anyway, never mind. 50 minutes, 40 seconds, you will see what I think is possibly the greatest dance-off that's ever been put on film. Definitely the greatest dance-off in 1931. It's a traditional shoe plattler, performed by 4 men, It has to be seen to be believed, and it comes straight after the most tragic scene in the film involving a young girl being accidentally drowned.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely selling.
So yeah, I think so. Your previous question, I'm pretty sure that's what the drowning is intercut with.
Yeah, it must be.
So yeah, James Whale was obviously a bit of a pioneer in terms of juxtaposition.
Yeah, man, sounds there. I need to go back and watch that too because I can't. I remember dancing stuff, but I don't remember specifically the four guys that you're talking about. So I'll for sure go back and watch it.
It holds the shot for about 30 seconds to a minute. You know, it just it doesn't cut to a close up. It doesn't. It's like we've got four guys dancing for the life of them. Let's just hold it.
Yeah.
So cut perfectly with a girl being thrown into a river.
Because a 70-minute film and he was committed to 1 minute of that being these guys dancing.
Well, I guess what it really does is it sells the fact that no one's going to hear a splash. You know, like no one's going to hear the fact that she's been tossed into a river. Like they're just having too much of a good time.
Yeah, man. The Baron's got the booze is flowing, all that kind of stuff.
It just sells the tragedy even more.
Yeah. I do remember that bit, like when he's like moving, the guy's moving through the crowd with Maria, like dead in his arms, kind of thing, which I thought was like a pretty intense shot or thing to have in the film as well. And it's kind of like you see the sort of the extras in the background that are sort of reacting as they go from the joy of the wedding or whatever to actually seeing, oh, there's a dead child here getting carried in. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm looking at that still right now. It's very well done. I mean, I guess it's sort of like party's over, guys.
I know, but does the mayor not have some bizarre line there too, where he's basically like, "What do you think you're doing? What coming in here with a dead child kind of thing? What's putting a dampener on things, mate?"
Yeah, he's like, "Can't you see we're having a dance off?"
Take your dead daughter somewhere else, and that's like, well, she's been murdered, and it's like, well, let's get our torches out and go kill this guy.
Yeah. It's quite a feat of screenwriting there, just to like turn it around like that.
Yeah. Oh man. No, so I mean, I guess do you have anything else that you want to add to things as well that we've missed?
I think that just about covers it. I mean, I would say for anyone who's interested in the history of film, horror films in general, this is definitely one worth checking out.
Yeah, man. I suppose if there's a lot of people will be listening. Well, I'm getting a bit presumptuous there. There'll be lots of people listening to this, but certainly I would think if there's people that are into horror films and stuff that it might be overlooked. I mean, that's like one of the things I've seen. Like I like a lot of horror films and stuff, man, too. And there's just I don't know. I never really and it's sort of. I mean, there's definitely something like taking the actual time to go watch this as well, specifically. Is just it was totally worth it to sort of come as a sort of beginning point, I guess, to not just for our podcast, but not even for cinema, I suppose, as well. But yeah, I suppose from back then, nearly a century ago, with this sort of horror and everything that kind of came afterwards because of it, it's really cool to sort of check that out.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be one of the most influential horror films of all time. So I think alone should hopefully entice people to watch it.
Yeah, man. And I think there's some of the stuff that we didn't know about too that we need to check out and stuff like that. I imagine at some point we're probably going to watch like Bride of Frankenstein and stuff too and kind of come back to it and hopefully maybe have some answers to some of the things that we didn't know today.
How do we get that windmill?
Yeah.
We hope you enjoyed the first episode of the Black Sunday podcast. Tune in next month when we'll be discussing Sam Raimi's 1987 masterpiece, Evil Dead 2. Until then, keep it spooky.